Does it feel impossible to balance work, sleep, exercise, a social life, and still try to build wealth? That was me for a very long time. About 9 years ago, I thought it was literally not possible to do all these things until I started thinking in systems. In this video, I want to share what system thinking actually means and how you can use it to build wealth. These are the strategies that allowed me to work full-time on Wall Street, build a business on the side, exercise, have a social life, and still achieve financial freedom all at the same time. So systems thinking is when you start looking at how all the different parts work together. Meaning instead of focusing on one big thing, you think about how everything connects and affects each other. It's sort of like setting up dominoes. So if you arrange each domino piece correctly, once you tap the first piece, they're all gonna fall in sequence. But if you arrange them incorrectly, then you're gonna end up running around the domino track trying to tip each individual piece. If you do systems thinking correctly, it's gonna help you find the right arrangement so you can create this natural chain reaction. Unfortunately, one thing that I notice is that most people don't think in systems. They think in goals. For example, New Year's resolutions. Hopefully you remember yours from the beginning of this year. Maybe you wanted to save more money, eat healthier, or even sleep more hours. But now, how many of you guys are actually still sticking to your resolutions? Studies show that 80% of New Year resolutions fail by February, just 1 month in. And that's mainly because setting a resolution is similar to like setting a goal, and all goals have one single weakness. They all rely on willpower. The problem is, willpower is just like a muscle. It gets tired over time. For instance, when was the last time you said you wanted to cook more instead of eating out, and then you realized after getting home from a long toxic day at work, you're really tired, and you just end up ordering DoorDash? Studies show that when you are mentally drained, you are way more likely to make impulsive decisions that work against your goals. Here's the thing, goals are your intentions, right? The outcomes that you want to achieve. But systems are the repeatable processes that will actually get you there. And I'll show you how making this one simple tweak will make it so much easier for you to build wealth. Let's say I want to save or invest more money, right? Most people will set this as a goal and tell themselves, all right, I need to invest at least $200 this month. But realistically, what's going to happen when it's the end of the week and all your friends want to get drinks at happy hour? Or what happens when you realize 5 days before the month is over that you already spent the $200 that you were planning to invest? You start to see how easy it is to just give in. Now, with the same scenario, but this time, we are gonna apply systems thinking to what we want to achieve, and you're gonna notice how much easier it becomes, and thankfully, it only requires 5 key steps. The first step is to define a trigger point. Simply put, it is the specific cue that kicks off your behavior or your action or what you want to do. This trigger point should not be vague, right? It's not gonna be, I'll do it when I have time. It should be more concrete, like I will do it on 7 p.m. on the 3rd Friday of the month. It's important that you do this step because it establishes an anchor point, and I'll go into an example of what that means in a bit. The second step is to design a process that starts immediately after your trigger point. This process needs to be as easy and low effort enough that it works even when you're tired or you're stressed, because you do not want something that only works when everything is going right. And I will admit that when I first started applying systems thinking, this part was a little bit challenging for me to understand at first. But basically, at this point, you are bouncing back and forth between step 1 and step 2. For example, earlier this year, I was helping one of my students who wanted to invest more money. Her plan was to invest whatever money was left over at the end of the month. So I asked her, right, have you ever tried this before? And she admitted yes, but she always ran out of money to invest at the end of the month. Unfortunately, this time her plan failed again. And it's because there's just so many random unexpected things that pop up throughout the month. Sometimes there's not enough money left over. Other times, after a very stressful month, you want to treat yourself to a nice meal to enjoy and live life. And so most people watching this will immediately think that she should just try harder, right? She should cut all her expenses and stop wasting money and prioritize investing. And yes, while that can work for a while, I don't think it's sustainable. And frankly, I think it is a terrible way to live life. So I told her, let's start thinking in systems, right? So we start looking at her goal of wanting to invest more, and then we try to find a trigger point. What is the one event that will tell her that it's time to do something? Remember, she was originally using the end of the month as her trigger point, which we saw did not work out. So we suggested, right, maybe this time we can set the trigger to when she starts paying her bills. In her case, she pays her bills on the 15th of the month, right? That is her trigger. Now, her process is, in addition to paying her bills, she's also going to transfer money to her savings and her investment accounts. So that's us trying to reduce the friction, right? Making it more effortless and seamless of managing our finances by doing it all together in one go in bulk and avoiding some of the issues that pop up by waiting until end of the month. But now this is where we start to play devil's advocate, right? What are some of the reasons that this trigger point in this process might not work out? In this case, if it's part of this mid-month billing cycle, what if one of her bills randomly costs a lot more than expected? What if it's her best friend's birthday earlier in the month and she wanted to buy a really nice present for her? Would you, or would she, have the willpower to prioritize saving and investing, or is there a good chance that you're just gonna give in? If you don't give in, then great, you found your trigger point in your process. But in my student's case, she was worried that she would give in. Which brings us to step 3, stress testing. What's the plan when the system or the process hits a bump or something ends up going wrong? Because trust me, things will go wrong. And that's okay if you are prepared, but in this case, she gave in, so it forced us to explore another option. Okay, so could we just make the trigger point earlier and reverse her budgeting process to eliminate any temptations altogether? For example, could she set the trigger immediately after she receives her paycheck? Then reversing the order of events, instead of investing what's left over, what if one of the very first things you do after your paycheck hits is your bank automatically transfers some money into your investment accounts? Then a few days later, you have your bank set up where it automatically pays your bills. This automated process further reduces the friction for her and it avoids new obstacles that popped up in the earlier example. And the great thing is, if she sets it up correctly, anything that is left over in her checking account after the bills is what I call flexible spending. Meaning she can spend whatever remaining money she has guilt-free because she knows all her other priorities are taken care of. Put simply, the first 3 steps of systems thinking is basically breaking the parts down, constantly testing ideas, and actively looking for things that can go wrong until you find a combination of separate parts that actually work. Now, as you cycle between the first 3 steps, you're already going to be in a significantly better place because each time you go through these 3 steps, you're going to come up with a more effective system that works for your personal situation. But here's the thing, all right? So no matter how foolproof you think your system actually is, it will eventually break. Some completely random, unexpected thing will happen, guaranteed, that will throw you off. With that said, the 4th step, which is arguably the most important one on the list, is called the safety net to help you minimize any breaking points. For instance, let's say you've been running your system pretty well for 3 months, but on the 4th month, your car breaks down and you don't have enough money to cover it. The first solution you have might be to use your credit card to pay for these things to balance out your finances so you don't overspend. But this is what I call a quick fix, because while these credit cards, yes, they can help you right now in the short term, it doesn't fix what the underlying issue is. Maybe you couldn't factor this in because you didn't have an adequate emergency fund built in yet. Okay, so you start thinking, right? Could you rework your process or your budget to factor this emergency fund in? Maybe you'll say, well, I can't because I don't know what will come up, right? It's unexpected, it's the future. All right, but can you plan next month's budget based on your spending history and set aside a little extra for an emergency fund? And over time, you're gonna have enough of an emergency fund saved up to handle these unexpected future problems. The reason we want to limit quick fixes as much as possible is because if something happens frequently enough and you continuously try to quick fix it, it will eventually break your system. In this case, if you can't pay your credit cards in full, then you'll be charged interest. And eventually these interest payments alone is going to start eating up more and more of your budget. By the way, everything that I'm showing you right now is in a free template that I use to manage my money. If you really want to start taking your finances as seriously as I did when I started, then you can use the same template for free, which I include in the link down below. It's already being used by tens of thousands of people. Now, to be clear, right, I'm not saying you need to fix every single underlying issue right away. Sometimes you need to use that credit card to get through the month while you build up your emergency fund. And that is completely fine, but you just want to make sure that it is a temporary fix while you work on the real solution. And that brings me to the 5th step that unfortunately I see way too many people overlook, and I call it the loop. To help illustrate this, ask yourself, would you still drive your car if you haven't taken it in for maintenance for like 20 years? Probably not, or at least you shouldn't. So would you want to build a system without checking in on it to make sure that it still works for you? So my first job out of college was on Wall Street, and something that I've never done before, but I picked up at work that I think in retrospect is very, very important was basically at the end of every quarter, I would sit down with my manager and we would evaluate my performance for the past 3 months. We talk about what worked, what didn't work, and then whatever didn't work, I would tweak, and then I would focus and do that one thing better. So that by the next quarter, I improve and it gets a bit better than the previous quarter. And that's probably why I killed it at work, even though I hated my job. If you don't continuously review, maintain, and tweak your system, it's going to get outdated fast, right? What if your income changes? What if your expenses increase? If I ate the same exact diet that I did when I was in college, then I would probably be in the hospital by now. So what you want to do is run a quarterly audit. It's basically like tasting your food while you are cooking. The quarterly audit is going to tell you if something is off, right? If there's too much salt, if there's not enough spice, so that you can fix the problem before it's too late, before you serve the final dish. So in the case with personal finance, once a quarter, you should collect the past 3 months of your spending history from your checking account, your savings, your credit card, all those statements that you have. Or you can just check out your updated money map, which is the template I shared with you earlier. And again, you can get it completely free with the link down below. Once you see all the information before you, you would just compare everything to reality. Once you have a holistic picture of your quarterly spend, right? How much you're making, how much you're spending, what you're spending on, you should be able to derive some key takeaways from it. Like, did you end up with too much flexible spending money left over, or were you just scraping by? If I consistently have a lot left over, then maybe I can contribute more to my investments, or I can use it to stack my cushion fund. There's nothing like seeing the evidence of your system and your process and your budget in front of you to force you to question whether or not it's working. And then you ask yourself what didn't work, right? And then you continuously try to improve it. You'll be pleasantly surprised by how much you'll learn about yourself that accomplishing what you want in life will become so much easier. Which brings me to something that you've got to start accepting. Even if you're trying your hardest to be better with money, sometimes you might still feel like you're not doing enough. And that might be because you don't know how the 1% actually manages their money and builds wealth, because it is way easier than you think. Click here to learn how the 1% actually manages their money.